Hello, I'm the real life fake wizard, and the wizarding world is back on the menu, boys. On March 25th, 2026, HBO released the first teaser trailer for Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Within 48 hours, it became the most watched trailer in HBO and HBO Max's history, with 277 million views. The premiere date is Christmas Day 2026, and the whole season will span over 8 episodes to cover the first book. This is meant to be a 10-year plan to adapt all 7 novels. On paper, this is the biggest entertainment event of the decade, and certainly meant to be the television replacement for something as large as Stranger Things. But beneath the record-breaking numbers, something else is happening here. The internet's reaction hasn't been unified excitement. The reaction has been something more fractured and defensive. Fans are not asking how good will this be, they are asking, how badly will Hollywood ruin this? That question tells you everything you need to know about where we are in the entertainment zeitgeist. Many people see this Harry Potter show as just another franchise getting a reboot, but I would challenge that and say, no. Harry Potter is the last major fandom still standing, and Hollywood is waiting and watching with bated breath to see how this show performs. Because if it succeeds, you're looking at the Hollywood age of nothing but remakes back to square one. Get ready, my friends, for Star Wars: A New Hope, written by Seth Rogen, directed by Ryan Coogler, and starring Cynthia Erivo as Luke Skywalker. Join us this summer for the Indie Game Circuit, a 3-day indie game showcase as part of the Southeast Game Exchange in South Carolina. You are cordially invited. Developers, we want to show off you and your games, give you the opportunity to meet gamers, get real feedback, and compete in a friendly competition for Indie Game Awards. Gamers, there will be on-site events and competitions daily where you can win exciting prizes and meet some of your favorite creators and voice actors. Join us this summer at the Southeast Game Exchange in Greenville, South Carolina, July 17th through the 19th. And developers, slots are limited, so apply now. The link is in the description of this video. We will see you there. To understand why this Harry Potter show's position matters, we need to look at the graveyard first and explore the fact that everything else has failed or died. Every dominant Western franchise of the last 40 years has either ended or destroyed itself. Marvel, DC, Star Wars, Doctor Who, Stranger Things, Disney Animation, Pixar, Game of Thrones, all of them are gone, diminished, or culturally irrelevant. At least with something like Cobra Kai, it ended on its own terms, but it's still over. Then we see shows like A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms and House of the Dragon, which are desperately trying to dig the Game of Thrones series out from the pit that the series dug itself into with its series finale. Overall, the graveyard is full, and the bodies are still very warm, and each franchise death has its own specific failures to blame, yes, but even then, every major franchise collapsed within roughly the same decade. One franchise failing could be a misfire. All of them failing simultaneously is a systemic problem. My friends, there are 5 people ruining entertainment: corporate executives, marketers, writers, content creators, and access media journalists. These 5 groups form an ecosystem that feeds on itself. Executives greenlight derivative content meant to be a cash grab to satisfy shareholders. Marketers sell it with promises they won't keep and pander to audiences that aren't interested. Writers produce work that is either safe and boring or self-righteous and detrimental to the property. Content creators turn the resulting mediocrity into false hype and praise, ready to attack anyone who questions what their financiers tell them to promote. And similarly, access media journalists shield the entire apparatus from accountability by reframing criticism as harassment and hatred. The franchises caught inside this machine never had much of a chance. Now, the system was always there to make money, right? Hollywood is a business, but whereas in the past, the superior motivation was to entertain audiences first and foremost in order to drive more sales on merit, the entire system became about extracting value from each franchise until the franchise collapses. And now it's moving on to the next one. Regardless of the controversies, Harry Potter is the last fandom standing. Hollywood is waiting by the phone, and that brings us to the more specific argument here. Every major studio in Hollywood is watching this show with a finger hovering over the green light button. If HBO's Harry Potter pulls off securing numbers from normie audiences, specifically normies here, and it almost certainly will, every executive sitting on a dead franchise will read that success as permission to try again. Warner Brothers will look at those Q1 2027 subscriber numbers and see proof of concept for the extraction model at its most ambitious scale. Disney will see it and start developing a remake of the original Star Wars trilogy, because if audiences will accept a new Harry Potter retelling the same story over and over again, there is no reason to believe they won't accept a new Luke Skywalker. Warner Brothers will likely wait a few years after Rings of Power finally dies off, and then you bet your bottom we're going to get a remake of The Lord of the Rings as an HBO series. Universal might dust off Back to the Future. Could you imagine that? And Sony will very likely consider giving Ghostbusters another shot. The dominoes are already lined up here. They just need permission to go. See, as we mentioned earlier, all of those franchises in the graveyard have had their value extracted to the furthest in their current state. The only possibility of restarting the cycle of extraction is to tell the stories over and over and over again, but in completely new canons and timelines and without formal connection to the original works. Executives have tried this before, yes, but now they've learned. You need to at least attempt to dress up your zombie franchise in the clothing your audience recognizes. By parading around in the marketing that this Harry Potter show was going to be super faithful to the books and the photos of the kids, and positioning that this would be the most faithful adaptation ever made, it put a lot of minds at ease. However, there are still a lot of outstanding issues we'll talk about in a moment, and just because Harry Potter will get normie audiences to watch for season 1, that does not mean they'll come back for season 2. This show has a tremendous obstacle to overcome, and the best way to explain it is to reference a book by Robert Greene called The 48 Laws of Power, specifically the chapter discussing never step into the shoes of a great man. When you must follow up someone who has achieved something extraordinary, everything you do is measured against their legacy, and even your successes feel diminished because the audience has already seen the best benchmark. The original Harry Potter films became the story for an entire generation. Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, and Rupert Grint established their careers, and the world watched them grow up on screen. Alan Rickman's Severus Snape became one of the most iconic performances, bringing a dimension to the character that made him into a legacy character. You had great performances out of the entire cast across each film, each of which established a baseline of greatness that now each of the new actors will be compared to. The John Williams score in the original films is so embedded into the collective consciousness of fans that, upon hearing it, you might experience an immediate emotional response, sending you right back to the halls of Hogwarts. These are movies that audiences have absorbed into their identity, shaping how an entire generation comprehended the values of loyalty, courage, and sacrifice in the face of adversity. And the films are long, each of them clocking in with at least 2 hours, and many of us can recite them word for word and beat for beat. These aren't movies that aren't in the zeitgeist anymore, you know? People are watching these on repeat all the time. There are channels on cable and streaming through the holiday season that are playing the films on repeat 24/7. To be completely clear, these films, even at the last one releasing 15 years ago, is still very much relevant to this day. The HBO show has to compete with all of that, and competing with a memory is a losing proposition because people idealize memories over time. The rough edges of the movie smooth out, the pacing problems disappear. There is no cultural demand for a do-over yet or ever. There is only a corporate need for content, and that distinction is the entire problem, because it means the show exists to serve the extraction model and not the audience at all. In all seriousness, the smarter play from HBO might have been to do something adjacent. Perhaps a Marauders-era series exploring the first war against Voldemort, a Founders of Hogwarts origin story set 1,000 years before Harry was born. Something that lives inside the wizarding world without inviting direct scene-by-scene and shot-by-shot comparison to the films. Any of those options would have let HBO build something new inside of this existing world that is very much still alive. Instead, lock and load, my friends. It's time for maximum value extraction. Have you brought value to shareholders today? The teaser has been live for about a week, and you can already see the 5 people ruining entertainment doing their thing in real time. Each red flag in the trailer maps directly to the system that killed every franchise in the graveyard. Firstly, the color grading looks terrible. The warmth and whimsy of the original Sorcerer's Stone has been replaced with desaturated gray-blue prestige TV aesthetic that dominates modern television. Everything looks cold, everything looks muted, the magic feels clinical. It does not at all make you want to go to wherever it is these folks are going, which is an element that dominated the original films. This is more than just aesthetics, however. Color is a storytelling device in the film. The series becomes progressively darker and more saturated across 8 installments, mirroring the narrative's tonal shift from childhood wonder to more of a wartime dread. This is what happens when executives and marketers make aesthetic decisions instead of storytellers. Someone at HBO looked at the visual language of Succession and Game of Thrones, which is desaturated and moody, and then applied that template to a children's story about 11-year-olds discovering that magic is real. You're a wizard, Harry. And, can someone turn on the lights? Papa Isidore has been cast as Severus Snape. Now, I want to start out and address that this guy, who I don't know and I've never seen in anything, is an actor. He auditioned for a job and he got the job. I don't think it's his fault the casting director and marketing team and executives and all the other decision makers involved picked him. He's a working actor who was offered one of the most high-profile parts in all of entertainment. And I can hear rebuttals to that. Wizard. He could have said no. He could have turned down the job. He could have said, Snape needs to be a white guy. I don't know, man. That sounds like a meaningless objection. If he declined the role on principle that Snape needs to be a white guy, right? The job would have been given to someone else, and in all likelihood, that person also would have been a black guy, because this was a deliberate creative choice by the showrunners. The actor bears no responsibility for the downstream implications of a decision he didn't make. I can't blame the guy. However, the casting does change the story quite a bit, and discussing what it changes is a separate conversation from discussing the actor himself. Severus Snape's arc in the Harry Potter novels is defined by persecution. He is bullied relentlessly by James Potter and the Marauders during their school years. He is humiliated, hung upside down, stripped of his dignity in front of his peers. This cruelty drives him toward the Death Eaters and toward Voldemort. The entire moral architecture of the series depends on the audience understanding that the Marauders' treatment of Snape, and also being dumped and friend-zoned by Lily Potter, contributed to the slippery slope of a life that he had. When Severus Snape is a black man and his tormentors are white guys, that complexity kind of collapses. The audience will not see schoolyard bullying anymore, and trades like Kotaku, IGN, Hollywood Reporter, and Variety, all of the trades, certainly won't let you see anything other than racial persecution. James Potter stops being a complicated figure who was cruel as a teenager and grew up into a good man. James Potter becomes something much harder to redeem, and Harry's entire emotional journey in the later books, where he has to reconcile the father he idolized with the bully his father actually was, gets flattened into a racial narrative that the books never intended. The show's creator almost certainly understands this, which means one of two things will happen. Either they will leave the Marauders as written and accept that a significant portion of the audience will read racial hostility into every interaction between James and Snape, which fundamentally reframes Harry's parents and their entire legacy. Similar, I would say, to the Superman family in the recent Superman 2025 film. Yeah, Jor-El is a bad dude now. Same thing here. Or, on the other hand, the showrunners might feel compelled to race swap some of the Marauders as well to neutralize the optics, which means the casting of Snape was never really about finding the best actor for the role and was always about a positioning decision that now requires a cascade of additional changes to manage. Either outcome here damages the story. And this is what the system does. The marketers and executives make a decision for reasons that have nothing to do with the narrative, and then the writers have to reverse engineer a story around that decision. And then the access media defends the decision by framing any discussion of its consequences as illegitimate, and the actual merits of the choice never get honestly evaluated by anyone in the pipeline. In the same cycle that played out with Star Wars, that played out with Rings of Power, that plays out every single time. How many of these books have Harry Potter saying, "Hey guys, I think Snape is up to no good. He might be the bad guy." Yeah, and now with Snape being the only black dude, congrats! Harry Potter's a racist too. Every franchise destroyed in the last decade launched with the same assurance. We're going to honor the source material. Amazon said it about Rings of Power, Paramount said it about the Halo series, Netflix said it about The Witcher and Cowboy Bebop, and every single time the promise of faithfulness was marketing language, more like a way to pre-purchase audience trust before the creative liberties began. This is the marketers doing exactly what the graveyard section earlier described, selling promises they won't keep and pandering to an audience whose loyalty they intend to spend rather than earn. This show has already described itself as a faithful adaptation of the books while making decisions that contradicts the source material's descriptions. The word faithful has become meaningless in Hollywood. When a studio says it in 2026, the informed audience hears what it actually means. We would like your trust up front, please, and we will spend it however we see fit. Hollywood's promises function as an unfalsifiable claim. Follow the books closely and point to it as proof of integrity. Deviate and call it faithfulness to the spirit rather than to the letter. The goalpost sits on wheels and the audience can never hold anyone accountable because the standard was designed to be unmeetable in one direction and undeniable in the other. Meanwhile, the access media will defend whichever version of the show delivers because that's what access media does. It validates the product after the fact, regardless of what was promised before the fact. Let's walk back through the graveyard one more time. Marvel, DC, Star Wars, Doctor Who, Stranger Things, Game of Thrones, Disney Animation, Pixar, all of them gone, diminished, or culturally irrelevant. Now, Harry Potter enters its most vulnerable chapter. A remake nobody asked for, produced by a system that has already demonstrated what it does to beloved properties. The question worth sitting with is simple. What replaces these? What new mega fandom or story or idea is emerging from the West to fill the space these franchises once occupied? The answer is sadly nothing. The closest cultural forces generating the kind of passionate, cross-generational, identity-shaping fandoms that defined Western entertainment for the last half-century are anime and manga, and they come from a completely different storytelling tradition. And the system we've described throughout this video, the 5 groups of people ruining entertainment, the extraction model, the optimization of everything creative into something safe and derivative, is exactly why nothing new can emerge, at least from the big Hollywood machine. Every dollar flows towards known intellectual property. Every greenlight meeting starts with, what existing property can we adapt this time, you guys? The financial model of modern entertainment is built on the assumption that audiences will only show up for things they already recognize, and that assumption gets reinforced every single time a reboot succeeds commercially. The system has made originality financially irrational, and so originality just doesn't get funded anymore. The death of the last fandom carries weight that extends beyond entertainment. Storytelling has never been decoration, even when we treat it that way. Stories are how cultures transmit values across generations, build shared identities among strangers, and create the connective tissue that holds communities together when everything else pushes people apart. The myths a civilization tells itself about courage, sacrifice, good, and evil aren't optional things. When the shared stories disappear and the system that could create new ones has been dismantled in favor of a model that only recycles old ones, what gets lost goes deeper than whether there's anything good to watch on a Friday night. Harry Potter may survive this. The show may turn out to be excellent. We don't really know yet. But the forces around it, the corporate hubris, and the fundamental impossibility of replacing something beloved with something manufactured are the same forces that killed everything else. And behind Harry Potter and its success upon normies all tuning in together on Christmas Day is an empty pipeline. There is no next great Western fandom waiting in development. There are only more reboots, more remakes, and more reimaginings of stories that were already told and already loved and were already enough. Until next time, create, innovate, inspire others to do so as well, and for the love of God, cancel Disney Plus. Goodbye.